Welcome back to Magus in the Media. Here we are. We are in for the big one tonight. The big one as in we are gonna go deep into what the hell is going on. And we must start at the beginning. And the beginning lies where everyone has to understand that we lie with deep within this cave. What cave is that? It's planet Earth. Planet Earth, the cities, the towns, and everything that is going on. You are all deep within Plato's cave. Why do I say that? Well, this is why I say that. Because it's February 9th. It's February 9th, meaning we are a month and a few days into this madness we call reality, and it seems like it's only getting stranger and weirder. The year started off with craziness and is going to just continue to beamline into straight up disclosure. And yes, I do mean that disclosure. We will get aliens by the end of the year. That's not prophecy. I'm not spreading any lies or anything, but we have to know that something's just not right. Steven Spielberg is coming out with a movie called Disclosure. And so if you don't already understand that they're trying to lay this quaint little thing out at you, that reality is bending at the very seams and fiction and nonfiction are blurring the lines. We are all in this together. And as Terence McKenna once said, this is what it feels like when a planet gives birth. So if you're out there, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because this is what's going on from now on. Magus in the Media is here to make sure we all understand that magic, myth, and meaning are in everything we do. And when you don't take a stand in your own reality, that means somebody else is doing it for you. And let's not allow other people to manipulate our brains any longer. And you got to ask yourself, you got to look in the mirror and you got to be like, am I allowing myself to be manipulated on a day-to-day basis? And if the answer isn't yes, you're not looking deep enough into that very mirror. Why? Why are you not looking deep enough? Well, because you've forgotten something. And what you've forgotten is that a long, long time ago, when you were first born, you were birthed into the depths of the cave. In Plato's Republic, he beamlines it to you kind of soon. You know, it may be in book 7 in Plato's Republic, but it's being laid out there the whole time. And he asks, within the deep, dark depths of education and knowledge, what can we truly know? You were born trapped in a cave. You are locked, head and feet and arms on a wall, as these images, your perception is seeing shadows on a wall. They're being projected onto the wall from behind you, and yet you don't know that. And so I want you to know, when you look into the mirror on a daily basis, you probably should be having some kind of mantra, let alone the mantra already being, wake up, Neo. Follow the white rabbit, something that is stirring the mind into gnosis. And what do we mean by gnosis? We mean direct experience of God in the Gnostic, realities of trying to figure out what the monad is, or what the universe is, or what is this that is all around us. But first, you must understand that I need to crack myself away from the wall. The wall is all you've ever known. The wall before you is all you've ever known. And behind you, often to the distance, there's a great light. We're trying to get to that great light. And there are some of us out there that lay little breadcrumbs all along, all the way out of the cave. But first, you must realize that before you reach that light, before you figure out maybe I can unshackle myself with my mind, I must first look on the wall and realize maybe, just maybe, what I'm seeing isn't reality. And why does that even matter? Why not just stay blissfully unaware of everything that's going on? Well, as we're finding out, blissful reality isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Because when you don't realize that the shadows on the wall are just that, shadows on a wall, impressions, perceptions, precepts, images, and that they're not the real thing that everybody wants you to think that they are, then you can finally understand that maybe there's something more than just the shadows. Maybe the shadows on the wall are being cast by something behind me. Can there even be a behind me to begin with? What does that mean? Okay, maybe I have shackles on my wrists and on my neck and on my feet. And I'm not talking about some kind of like kinky shackleness. What I'm talking about is you have been there since birth and you are a slave, right? You are a slave, Neo. It's time to wake up. And it's really important to know the philosophical differentiation between what a perception is and what reality is. And that's something we figure out as we are dragged out of the cave, kicking and screaming, some have said, into the brilliance of the light. As the sun shone upon my skin, I, for the first time, had found myself in between what I thought was and what is God, right? Interesting enough, that's just one representation of God, the sun, in the Platonic dialogues. It is a representation of the forms, of the true and the sacred, that sacred geometry and all the New Age / Pythagorean ideals. It is something that everything you see, the cup, right, the phone, the computer screen, all these things, they are mere smatterings of what is real outside of this reality we call home. Why is that important? Well, I'm going to tell you. It's important because right now, outside, if you were to open up your curtain, you can realize that there may just be a city humming about you, or you may be out in the country or whatnot. You see nature or you see other houses or whatever it is you see out there looks okay. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't look too bad. And so it's such an interesting thing that if it doesn't look too bad outside, then how come every time I look within this black mirror, this screen, these shadows on the wall, right? Even some of us project shadows on the wall with a projector screen and a blank white canvas. And then what you think that is actually what's going on the ground, wherever it's going on, right? The Super Bowl is going on. The Epstein files are being dropped. People are getting murdered, at all times. And then you think that what you are seeing of those things are actually what's actually happening out in reality. But how can that be? You have yet crawled away from the cave. Have you even unshackled yourself from the wall in the first place? These are true questions. And so when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you must ask yourself, am I real? Am I human? Am I an animal? And so it's quite fascinating. And these things must be thought of. Got a nice little question here. So the question is, you don't think Plato's cave is allegory? Many layers of abstraction, my friend. For when you've experienced something like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening or experienced a higher level of consciousness, where from practices such as the LBRP, ceremonial magic, or deep understanding of Kabbalah awakens you to a higher state of consciousness, and it's practically impossible to explain that to others who haven't experienced it. True, Gnosis and the unveiling of Doth Yet. And so it's really interesting. You're hitting on something quite fascinating, and it's very true, and there are ways out of the cave. Do I think it's allegory? Well, interesting enough, Plato was writing in metaphor. Plato was writing in myth. Plato was an authentically amazing poet. These are dialogues. Plato isn't in any of them. Like I said on the last stream, Socrates and a bunch of students and other Athenians are the ones that Socrates is coming up against and chatting with. When really all Socrates wants to go do is live his normal everyday life. And he can't, because interesting enough, as he's walking, a gentleman wants to stop and chat with him to go somewhere. And so what he has what they say, a slave boy, stop Socrates from going on his merry way, as Socrates is in the very beginning of the Republic descending, interesting enough. And what do? We descend within the cave. Plato is writing about an allegory and a myth. But interesting enough, myths and allegories are our lived experience as we're trying to understand it. We must put them in words. We must put them in metaphor, because words are never actually touching the thing. And so this is something that I need to explain in a way that really hits home. This is the way to think about it. Your perception, right? So as you're looking at something, you are perceiving something else, right? As you look at the computer screen or as you hold the cup in your hand, you're looking at it. And you initially think that you're witnessing the actual cup, right? Yes, the cup is in your hand. There is objective truth. There is something real out there. However, what you must understand is that you have many layers of inferences and perceptions that are covering up what the actual cup truly is. The actual cupness of cup, right? Why does that matter? Because you must understand that just like you're never truly seeing the cup, that metaphor goes along the lines is that you are shackled to a wall looking at shadows on the wall. And so what people are telling you is real. You must ask yourself, is this a narrative that somebody wants me to think so I can then move an ideology or move in a certain direction that is going to fulfill somebody else's needs? I think that's really interesting. And then as you wrote here, I think it's, once you have the first kind of awakening, whatever that is, it doesn't have to be something as profound as a Kundalini experience. It can be a global mass something that happens, an event, a black swan event happens, or something happens in your daily life where you're walking and you trip and stumble and all of a sudden you look up and what you think happened, it wasn't really what happened, right? Phenomenologically speaking, what happens to us all the time, and this is something that can easily wake you up, is that you think Bill or Bob or Sue is walking down the street. You've seen them a million times before. So you instantly think it's them. And then they get closer. And then you realize that's not the person that you thought it was. Why did you think it was who you thought it was right away? And you were just like, that is real. This is Bill, Bob, or Sue. And then you see them and you realize, no, it's not. What ends up happening most of the time is you continue on your way thinking your perceptions and your impressions and the things that you see are real. When right there, you just got an instance where you were wrong. That wasn't Bill, Bob, or Sue. That was somebody else that you've never met before in your entire life. Why is that important to this moment of understanding that what Husserl said is that perception is a gamble. And that gamble is something that you're taking on a daily basis with all things. You must understand that, as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. When we're looking at something before us, how it's being presented to us is the message that is being put forth. And I'm stating that in multiple meta ways. The box that you see before you is just that. Interesting enough, I bet if you did the ratio, it would be a golden mean ratio. It'd have this sacred geometry attached to it. And that has its own ways of imprinting things into the mind. And at the same time, I'm going to play a clip from the great Dr. Jack Kruse. The computer screen itself is also blipping small bits of blue light at us at all times, really fast. And that's how this connects to mind control and MK Ultra. And we slipped down the rabbit hole so fast we didn't even know what was going on. How does that relate to Plato's cave? You didn't realize you were shackled to the wall to begin with, and that you've been shackled there since birth. And I'm going to keep coming back to this over and over and over again. You need to use myth, metaphor. You need to use allegory. The allegory of the cave. It needs to be told to you in a story, which is then why Magus in the media and what we're trying to do with showing you what stories are doing to you, that there is a great myth in every great story of the hero's journey unfolding, or there's levels of mind control that you can't even explain or see. And that is MK Ultra. That is something that has been going on since the beginning of the dawn of television. The medium is the message. What are we getting at? Just like the cave wall that you're shackled to, there's a wall in front of you. Most likely it looks like a certain shape, a large rectangle. Seeing what I'm saying here? When there is now a projection onto that, and you can think that the things on the wall are real, take that allegory to your everyday life and realize as we're getting fed information through the small little rectangles or through the TVs, through the books that are rectangles as well, right? It's not that it's a rectangle, it's that it's trying to fit you and your mind into this Cartesian space, this Aristotelian language with this Cartesian space that makes you feel mechanical, functional, and postmodern, because whatever is fed to you through these things, truth can be thrown out the door because it all can be true. That's not real. It all can't be true. There is but truth, and it reveals itself to you the more you walk out of the cave, the more you see the forms and witness the beauty, have gnosis. And once you have gnosis, or direct experience of something that cannot be talked about, cannot be heard, because it surpasses the way the mind can take in information. It's too much. But if you wrap it in a myth, put it in a story, and then through time, the mind can unravel the meaning of what is going on, then, and only then, can you finally realize that you're shackled to the cave wall. And then, yes, it is things, these practices like the LBRP and ceremonial magic, deep understandings of the Kabbalah, they will wake you up. Meditation, those types of things. Interesting enough, it doesn't wake up everybody. And we have to ask ourselves why. Well, interesting enough, there are such things as the 8 circuits of consciousness that Robert Anton Wilson, John C. Lilly, and Timothy Leary wrote about. Another interesting enough is John C. Lilly and Timothy Leary were known as more transhumanistic thinkers. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because we are throwing our own words that we don't truly understand, and we only have inferences. So even in the truther spheres, we throw around words like transhumanism, which I think in the end, yes, isn't all that great, but used as a metaphor for the mind-body syzygy, the synthesis between these things, then we can have a clear path on how to become our own meta-programmer. But then when blown up from the outside and seen it from a different angle, seen it from the angle of maybe techno-oligarchic billionaires, and then those same people think that they have had not a Gnostic experience, which maybe or maybe not. They have the experience from their high tower, right? This highest aspect of the castle, and they look down upon everyone else, the inverted version of what a philosopher king is. They think that then they know how to lead humanity through major crises. Fascinating, right? They create a certain crisis to then give you a solution for that crisis. And then from that solution, it moves us into the next stage, continuing on forever. Problem, right? Reaction, the people, the solution. We've figured it out deeply into the cave. Because the people at the top actually haven't walked out of the cave. Some of them may have walked out and come back in, but then what ends up happening is they forgot. They forgot that they walked out of the cave. They forgot they had a divine experience, and they forgot that they were just like everybody else, and that actually they never wanted to be shackled to the wall. And then they go back into the cave and they have this kind of experience, and all of a sudden they become the people helping project information onto the wall to keep everyone else asleep. And so, as I talked about last stream, something that doesn't get really brought up all that much but needs to be talked about is what if there are somebody in the allegory of the cave who's since birth been strapped to a wall and is viewing these signs, symbols, sense impressions, perceptions, words and images on a wall, the shadows on the wall, and you are taking those for things as being real, and that must be cast onto the wall by a light behind you. And then that light behind you isn't the true light. There's a farther off distance true light that you want to reach. But first you must understand these few steps to get to an understanding that there are other people in the cave that aren't attached to the wall. And they think that they've become free from the wall, even though they're still within the cave. And then some people get unleashed from the cave wall and then turn around and then just instantly start working in the cave, thinking that they've freed themselves. And yet they're strapped within the bounds of their own mind in the cave still, thinking they've become free. Do you see where I'm going with this? Where I'm going with this is interesting enough that there are some people who have undone themselves from the cave wall somehow. Yes, got dragged kicking and screaming up to the true light, right? To get themselves outside. They've gone past these other people who thought that they've unattached themselves, but they haven't. And then they go outside, and then you are like, hey, I actually want to go. You can go back in, but realize the metaphor of the cave is the metaphor of the republic and the metaphor of the city. And when we realize that the city is but a metaphor, and and like the old dictum of the Hermetics say, as above, so below, as within, so without. We are only as good as individuals as this state or the republic is. Another small, interesting reminder is that in Greek times, there was no term for the republic. Like, the republic wasn't that word. That didn't come around until later. But the word they have was regime. Interesting enough, that word now through time has a lot of baggage. And so we must unload that baggage and go back to the word, the republic. We get a nice little comment stating you only see what you're allowed to see on the walls. True enough. But you must understand you can see more than that. You're only allowed to see those things until you actually take your own agency up and you start questioning things, and then you start following breadcrumbs. And from those breadcrumbs, you try to learn some things on that way or two, like certain arts, like the same art that Socrates is talking about. Socrates, throughout the whole Republic, is speaking about what is justice. And he's destroying one definition of justice, might equals right, after another, right? Justice is, that kind of going up and realizing you're old now and you must repent for all these things that you've done in the past and you can become a just man, to realizing that justice is the harmony of the tripartite soul with the harmony of the republic. That true justice is when you have all these things in line and you act in a true way, in an authentic way, the way of the philosopher king. And must be known that the philosopher king doesn't want to rule. That's one of the contradictions. In the republic, the philosopher king is they're the rulers. He's putting out there that we must follow this eugenical plan of making sure no one in the guardians or the craftsman class, none of the normal people know their lineage or the family, because how can you, if you have allegiance to your family, have allegiance to the state? And then all of a sudden we start seeing these things, and he doesn't ever give you that's what we must do. He's telling you of a story. So the Republic being its own story, Socrates is telling a story. In the end of the Republic, it tells another story. There's just, these are meta stories, mythologies and allegories that are being placed in front of us. Why? To decode the programming of the Athenian state, to decode the programming of the techno-oligarchical regime that has been programming you since you've been but little people, since you were born. That is part of the Gnostic myth. The Gnostic myth in a lot of our occult, esoteric, mythological, or philosophical spheres, especially coming through you on this TV, on this computer, some people tell you a lie. And how they do it is a little mischievous. They don't do it in a way that I think a lot of them are actually meaning it maliciously, and some of them are. But other people are still trapped in the cave, even though they're describing it very well. And what I mean by that is, in some of the Gnostic myths, just like our Platonic myth of being in the cave, some of the Gnostic myths tell us that we are trapped in the material world, in matter, and our true origins are a divine light within. And that once we realize that true origin of the divine light within, we can then seek gnosis, or have gnosis, or experience directly the numinous, the phantasmagoric, the imaginal, God. And by doing so, we can shed our mortal coil and ascend unto the celestial spheres, the luminaries, and to God. Interesting enough, that's not what everyone thinks is the correct path. Weird. People have different ways of thinking. This is something that we can only get to once we realize that there's more to our life than that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. That we have something to live for, meaningful, something outside of ourselves. Maybe not so much outside, but within ourselves, right? That's the taking its place from the exoteric to the esoteric. Something that the select few realize. That you must follow the white rabbit, Neo. And you must follow it down the rabbit hole. Another cave. You get told that there's not but one cave, but many. Many different little arenas of reality. And then when you go within them, they kind of work themselves differently. So we could see the cave in a different psychological terms, a Jungian way, that you are going within the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind isn't, and this is an interesting thing that people need to start thinking about, is that the unconscious mind is very malleable. That's why when you go within it, if you're unconscious yourself, if you don't have your own levels of self-awareness and you go within, you have then become easily programmable, and you can take everything as solid and mechanistic. And you can be told what to do and think, and then that can be raised up around you, like Inception, the movie, right? Inception, they go within the many levels of the dream realm, within the mind and the imaginal, again, in the phantasmagoric. Carl Jung states that the collective unconscious is laden with myth, metaphor, mystical experiences, and religious and symbolic motifs. Why is that important? Because there are many levels, we must get past the Freudian desirous animal who moves around in these fight or flight and these second circuits in the 8th circuit model of the anal territorial, right? This is mine, you can't have it. Moving ourselves up as we go through it, the socio-political. We have many, these first 4 circuits that we move through. And we must realize that we are more than that. And that's why the way of talking about it, the 8 circuits of consciousness, that once we reach a hedonic state, these hedonic, not hedonic as in hedonism, this this neurosomatic state. The somatic can tend towards the hedonic, as in the hedonistic. And that's what we want to stay away from. We want to move up the middle pillar, not falling to either extremes of severity or mercy. Because on the path, we're trying to fully fledge out the king, lover, warrior, magician. And if you're not your own magician, somebody else is being that for you. Dark sorcerers and the architecture of control. I'm laying it out for you and myself as we go through this, that there are dark sorcerers, there are philosopher kings that think they're in control of the entire world. They are in control of your unconscious mind, and they know how it ticks. They can move within it with their little microscopes, now nanotech, right? These interesting little tools that they were using in the early 1900s when the electricity was trying to be figured out. We went to war for certain things, World War I, World War II. In the mid 1800s, all of us in the early to mid 1800s, all of a sudden our planet was being covered with electricity because we had realized something. We were moving into the industrial age. And from that, we moved into the age of information and the age of AI. It's not like, what does organic mean or inorganic? Are these things organic? Yes, of course. But as information increases, as we have the ability to move communication faster and faster, information speeds up. And it's those in control of that information who are manipulating the little black boxes in front of us. They are what they think to be the architecture of control. And what I'm trying to tell you is why it's so important to read classical literature and understand mythology, to see where we've been first and before maybe reading the histories of those things, is because the history books, the sociological, the anthropological, all these things, the archaeological, all these things to me, they take human perception first. You must perceive the things before you so you can understand them. And so, yes, you can carbon date things and you can figure out its location and time, and we have facts and empirical evidence. You can have that Humean, that Aristotelian underpinning, and it's important, the mathematical, the scientific, but we must understand, where do these things come from? Well, first we must have the ability to question and ask why and what. And upon asking why and what, you can then go into understanding that it is through that hermetic understanding, the hermeticism stemming in that 100 AD time frame, before and after, where we, the Neoplatonic thinkers and the Stoics and these great minds of old who are formulating some of the greatest of literature of all time, even today in 2026, where we are just covered in noise and nonsense. That when we understand the architects of control and the dark sorcerers have been moving through our time periods for a very long time in control of the cave, that's exactly what it is. They're in control of the cave. The cities and the towns and the world itself is but a mere cave, a representation of higher principles and understandings, higher principles of the phantasmagoria in that time frame. In our time frame. Interesting enough, they have control of your mind. And so to go back to the allegory of the cave, you must see that everything going on in today's time is pure madness. And it's separating us into this Hegelian dialectic of left versus right. This conservative versus liberal, this, the madness. And yet, funny enough, people don't understand that each one, when you separate it off, finds itself right back being the exact same. Why? Because the human individual who seeks understanding outside of themselves will always be manipulated by those who are in power. And that's not a patriarchal power. That's the power of those who control the information. The humans who are in control of this, because it's And it may be more than humans, I'll state. There are things going on in history that we can't even fathom. That the deeper we get into understanding our birthright, it is that we, as Graham Hancock states, we are a civilization with amnesia. Interesting enough, Plato, his whole epistemic, his whole understanding of knowledge is that of the forms are but a remembering. When you wash yourself through the river of Lethe, you forget, and when you come back through the river of Nemsen, most likely mispronounced that, that's how you can remember. And through your life, you have these existential moments of understanding that maybe what I'm thinking, the world is getting a little too crazy. I don't know what's going on. I don't think I can handle it. And that's when we go back to our practices. Go back to what you were talking about. Your mystical meditation chants, your devotions and your dedications, your ceremonial magic, your LBRP, your studying of the Kabbalah, you're going back to classical literature. These are all your warrior path. You're doing your Kung Fu, you're training your martial arts, you're doing your magic. Whatever that looks like. As someone wise always tells me, there are many vehicles, right? There are many vehicles of this experience of Buddhahood. But you must take control of the mind and take control of the body. Because when one can control your emotions with the mere flickering of the switch on the TV, of the computer, of the phone, getting control of your endocrine system, of your dopamine receptors and serotonin, of your lymphatic system, of the cortisol release in the body, then you will make poor decisions because you've misplaced mere narration and manipulation for truth. But they are not that. It is but merely shadows on a wall. So is it true that they can manipulate you by your phone screens in your computer? Well, it most definitely is. That voice you just heard real quickly was the great Jack Cruz talking about the things on your computer screen, and we're going to listen to it. And this is one bit of information that is really important, and we're going to make sure it's the right one. Let's hit it right now, right? We are doing it live because that's how we know how to do things. Here we are. Jack Cruz.
Screens are blue lit. The reason none of them are red lit, the reason none of them pay attention to circadian biology is because that original technology was developed in a government program that Bobby Kennedy knows about, and I happen to know about because I went to medical school at LSU. For those of you who've never heard about Operation Paperclip, you think it's all conspiracy theory. So at Tulane Neurology and Tulane Neurosurgery in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, the CIA started a program there where they would do all these crazy things to monkeys. The CIA wanted to see how they could control things utilizing different things like drugs and things like that. Where the neurosurgeons got involved, which is my clade, we would drill tops of the heads off, put wires into the thalamus, put electricity in there, and kind of see what kind of behavioral changes we could have. One of the guys that was in that program was a guy named Professor Delgado. When he saw that we could control the behavior with the wired device, he said, what if we do it wirelessly? So he checked it in monkeys and checked it in bulls, and it turned out you can do it wirelessly with RFID chips and semiconductors. Then the CIA took it to the next level. They said, well, since this is electromagnetic radiation, what if we did it through light through screens? And it turns out you can. And that's the reason why all your computer screens have the frequencies they have. So why is this all important? Well, the person that set this meeting up between me and Bobby is the patent attorney that made sure that Google and Meta have those things so they can control the things that we all do. Where did the original idea come from that started off in MK Ultra with the CIA? You're going to be surprised when you hear this. It came from the mafia in Las Vegas. They wanted to build a new city in a desert. They enclosed it all, blacked out the windows, invented slot machines that were blue lit. And they found out that they didn't have to take a gun, stick it in your face to steal your money. And they even got smart. They said, let's give people free alcohol.
That
while
wild.
they're doing
That's
that.
wild.
And they found out they got the money quicker. And that's when the CIA got the idea to start this program. That's really how it started.
That's really how it started, he says. That's really how it started. So, what did he just say? The mafia, obviously, had their own level of investment in Las Vegas, and they needed to figure out how to basically get you addicted to just doing all the things and giving you the money and continuing the system of the simulation that is Las Vegas. Completely and utterly fake. It's the city of sin. We all see it. It's wild. City of sin, what's that mean? There's also massive amounts of terrible things going on. There's tunnels underneath Las Vegas. There's so many homeless people and drug addicts, so much human trafficking going on. It's fucking crazy. But we allow these things to happen. So we go to these places and we give them our money and we play the slot machines. Well, when they figured this out, that they didn't have to hold people up to gunpoint, that they could just integrate blue light all over the place, and you're playing the slot machines, blue light also stimulates the dopamine receptors, and it's dumping these great feelings that you're actually winning when you're losing your entire life savings. Now just think of that. What's going on? That's truly what MKUltra was doing in the 50s and 60s when they were trying to understand the human brain, the human nervous system, so that they could basically control you not only through stimulating actual wires and perceivers and different things in the brain, which they did. They hooked monkeys up into their brain with wires and stuff, and they were able to make animals move basically remotely using the controlling systems with these things. Now they don't even need to do it remotely anymore, because we have Wi-Fi data centers, Wi-Fi routers in our phones that are emitting large amounts of EMF, and the screen itself is continually flashing blue light at us, that unless you have a great structure of safety around you, or a wise mind, a critical thinking, a healthy brain, gut, nervous system, brain, body, mind, soul, all these things are working against you. And that is what the dark sorcerers are doing, right? Dark sorcerers is a really fun thing to say, that there are dark sorcerers controlling the world. That's what a lot of the conspiratorial world says. And when they say it, even though there's truth to it, it sounds like nonsense, because it's this schizo, dark, black pill nonsense where they're trying to wrap all things into one great big bow. And throughout the next few weeks, probably for a very long time, I'm going to start coming out with videos that are telling you that that's not completely true. Yes, there are sorcerers controlling your mind. Yes, they are doing things atrocious like blackmailing politicians and trafficking people, and stealing their money because of the Super Bowl or taxation, or the list goes on. But that is exactly what I'm saying, actually. Yes, these are things that are going on by those dark sorcerers. You can claim are not but the dark sorcerer of your own ego. And so if you cut off your ego, right, not destroy it for a while, right? The blackening, the alchemical, it really is important. The negredo, really important concepts that are actually to be lived and experienced through our everyday living. How do you do that? The breakdown, the deconstruction. One thing these schizo-conspiratorial people do is they only tell you about the breakdown, and they don't tell you about the rebuild. Right? Go into the mind. Well, what do you do once you're there? I don't know. Okay. Now you're lost. You don't have the correct tools to go within the great unconscious because you'll never make it out. Just like it's like once I'm deep into this understanding that the dark sorcerers are controlling the world, or I'm deep within Plato's cave, I was strapped to a wall, now I'm not. Now what? Right? Well, you must continue to deconstruct your thoughts so you can try to find what is true, what is numinous, what is real. And we do that through exactly what we've been talking about. Crucify your ego before it's far too late. Move within the dark night of the soul, right? Completely agree. Move within the dark night of the soul. It will happen. We will have existential breaks throughout the entirety of our human existence. But those moments are the moments where we can reach and we can swim instead of drown in the sea of the unconscious. We can have moments of ecstasis, of Socrates' greatest love, of eros, divine madness. And it is then which we can find ourselves seeing a clearer picture of things that were within the cave. Because once I'm out of the cave, I'm blinded by the light. But when I go back in the cave, as Plato writes, I still have blindness because now it's so dark, I cannot see. And so once we go back into the cave, once we go back into the cities, you must have a community. You must have a community and find like minds. And with those like minds, you may have to speak in code. As Alphonse Levi writes in the Transcendental Magic and a lot of his work in The Alchemist of the Ages, they say to live, to ne'er, to do, to live, to dare, to know, but to remain silent. Which is why then the Masons and many secret societies and magical institutes cover things in code and word and secrets. Because they are burning witches still to this day. Crazy enough, Vice has come out with an article talking about how, and I think this is true, I think that it's nonsense that there are individuals out there, the New Agey witch, anybody who thinks that they're casting spells on people, and there are people who can and do these things. But I will tell you that when you play with fire, you don't only get yourself burnt, but anybody else in the vicinity or who uses these terms. Because if you have not understood what it means to will, to dare, to know, and to remain silent with certain things. And so interesting enough, here we go, look at this. In this age of extreme lefts and rights, there is both extremes will burn witches. And it doesn't matter. You need to realize that here is another one from Vice. It says, Etsy witches say spell casting is no longer welcome on the platform. Weird. Wonder why. A, because you're a charlatan and you're selling something that's not real. It's complete and utter madness. There are so many ads on Vice that I can't even handle it. So we're just going to delete that. The idea is that for years, people have been selling spells and curses on Etsy. It's not real. Anybody who's bought a curse or a spell from somebody, it's not real. It doesn't work. You know what works? What works is using poetry to such an extent that you can cast a curse on somebody and not only themselves, but their entire family and their lineage for life on end. And you didn't really do it. You just spun a tale. Like a myth or a metaphor. Alan Moore talks about it. That the magicians are tough and mighty, but the bard is somebody who, with his spoken word, has the ability to basically create such a story through time that if you have wronged them, that they can move mountains to make sure that your karma, that your mind spins out and everything in front of you is drawn in and all of a sudden there's chaos in your life. But that's not what's happening on Etsy. And if these things continue, not only will those youngins have to cry to their mommies and daddies, but everyone around them that is eccentric or has alternative views, and is just trying to live their lives and do their magic and their mystical practices and their dedications alone. Leave me alone. I just want to help everybody else realize what's going on out there in the world. And that's not so wrong. But if things like this matter keep coming up, if the charlatans and the sophists, the people who sell snake oil in these communities continue to do these things, either side is going to be burning everything that they don't understand down. And that's not just the evangelical right, the extreme right. That's also the extreme left, who doesn't understand that the things that they are perceiving are but mere shadows on a wall. That if you don't have a complete, whole, personal king lover warrior magician or queen lover warrior magician, that if you're not looking for the middle path, that then you're falling to either extremes. And just like the Jedi fell, so do the Sith. Right? Another metaphor that we must understand. And if you are falling to either extremes, you haven't walked out of the cave to witness the forms, the beauty, the good. And you have not become just, and you are not the just man. You are but a mere pawn, a useful idiot for the dichotomous Hegelian dialectic, that either side believes they are right, and so you will continue this thesis, antithesis, synthesis, so on and so forth, and you will be but a mere puppet on a string. That is being inundated with symbols and signs and delusions. At a young age, not only were you attached to the cave wall and you didn't even know it, and up until this day and age, maybe until this very moment, you finally realize that you're just strapped and it's time to wake up. You're strapped to a cave wall and you are but a slave. Again, you are a slave, Neo, and you don't even know. And it's time to wake up. So you must make a decision just as Neo did. He didn't choose it right away. He got caught. He got caught by the Smiths, by Agent Smith. Agent Smith brought him into a white, clear room and was able to make Neo believe that his mouth was sewn shut and that a spider/mechanical thing was able to integrate himself into him so he could be tracked. And then he couldn't see, hear, and then he wakes up in his bed. Interesting enough, these are illusions and manipulations that can be done to you when you are put into a subtle imprinting state. Imprint vulnerability is what it's called. To go back to what Dr. Jack Kruse was talking about, the blue light that was figured out how to be used in MK Ultra in the 50s and 60s, before MK Ultra was Project Artichoke. These are things to look up, where they worked on the human mind and started using neuroprogramming drugs like LSD and other entheogens and other drugs. And what they did to the mind is they put you into such a state that you could be tinkered and tampered with. And at any moment you could be awakened by the hinting of a tone or by the flicker of a light. And why it's important to then do this great work, going through the dark night of the soul and going through your alchemical process, igniting on your hero's journey and waking up from the cave, that you can walk out into the light and witness the forms, is because the more you take in the forms and you become a philosopher king, the more you have the ability to then go into the cave and withstand the darkness. And yes, I will state these entheogenic drugs, these drugs of the gods, must be thought of just like the fire of the gods of Prometheus. Prometheus, that rebellious spirit who created man and just wanted to give man a few of the gifts of the gods. He was punished for it, placed on a stone and his liver to be eaten out forever. But as man used fire to create warmth, heat his food, to change his neurobiochemistry of the body, to be able to create agriculture and cities and civilizations, we would also use that same fire to burn the world down. Double-edged sword, it's not the fire, it's the use of said fire. Entheogenic drugs are the same thing. It's the use of them. Once used to be dedicated to the mystery schools, the great mystical societies, the cultures of religious and divine experiences, the Dionysian ecstatic states, the Apollonian divine music and harmony of the spheres. And through time, those mystery cults were washed away by the exoteric priest class. And those who thought themselves better than the rest, who started manipulating the world at such a level that we all of a sudden stopped realizing exactly who we were or where we came from. And that along that path, we had the ability to wake up at any moment several times. And still to this day, we're continuing that process of awakening. We must not give power to the illusionary dark sorcerers around us. They're illusionary and very real. These great grimoires behind me and around all of us who are in the more magical and mystical worlds, holding these worldviews, they've been inverted by individuals who didn't know how to read the signs and symbols, so they started making shit up. And it's very dangerous. They started working flippantly, and there are a few who then were able to control them, who do know what's going on, who are in touch with our ancestors of the past through either message, through, papyrus, through paper, through meditation, through these mystical practices of invoking and evoking gods, tuning your nervous system so you can take in new levels of communication, kind of like tuning of the radio station to find a different channel. Some say our nervous system is just that. Nervous system brain connection is fine-tuning itself to tune into the consciousness and the soul of who you are. Which is then why it's so important to turn off the TV at certain times and realize that the Super Bowl is just mere war games. And that they, for some reason, needed 2 of them this year. Not 2 Super Bowls, but 2 halftime shows. It's so stupid. Who fucking cares about the Super Bowl? A lot of people who love sports hate nationalism, and yet they're participating in the very nationalism that they hate. It makes no sense. And then they start fighting over what team is going to win. It's bread and circuses out there. And then they start fighting about which halftime show is better than the other. They both suck. Are you kidding me? It's another excuse to inundate yourself with alcohol and not think about the problems that you need to be facing. And not making yourself into a king, lover, warrior, magician and balancing out all the elements that you are holding within you. You have all the tools to break yourself free from the cave, and yet you choose to stay still chained to the wall. And I'm not part of this. I make choices on a daily basis that keep me locked within an emotional state. And that these practices, magical, mystical, and the warrior practices, things that help jostle up the first 4 circuits of your nervous system, they jostle it up because you need to be able to change your perspective. So to be able to change your perspective, you change your nervous system and how you take in information. These things are really important. And it is interesting enough. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of losing the grip as we come into and out of certain ages. So I think that it's I think it's true. And that's why I like the perspective of Terence McKenna stated. I've said it many times. This is what it looks like when a planet gives birth. In birth, there's a lot of birth pangs and suffering. So if you can withstand the suffering, right, as the Buddhistic saying is, Mahasukha, all is suffering and in perfect harmony. And amongst that suffering, you must stand your ground and find your rooting. You must have the ability to realize that you're sitting on an old stone in the middle of the ancient world, and somebody is taking you through your mind, the memories that you have accumulated through every lifetime. And you are just going through another one of those memories. And then you realize that you are doing that, and at the same time, every day, you're allowing people to manipulate your every movement and choice. So you have to start asking yourself, almost all the time, are the decisions and choices I'm making my own? Or am I being manipulated to do these things? And I think that's very healthy, because it's not just the black pill where, oh my God, that's happening. But then it's like, here are the solutions. Okay, it's time to write down exactly what I think. And let's get to the bottom of this. Why do I think the way I do? Why do I hold the ideologies that I have? Am I fighting for myself or somebody else? How do I get to the stillness within my very heart so I can tap into the higher power that I know that there is? Because right now, you must realize that there are attractions and that there are repulsions. Obviously, you felt the attraction once, twice, maybe you're in it right now. The great eros, that passion that pulls us into this world. And at times, there will also be the great suffering, the revulsions, the things that you must push away. But those times are the dark night in the soul, the times to clear up your mind and say, this is actually what I believe. And I don't need to fall to either sides. I can have a nuanced opinion because I am my own magician. And I am choosing to reprogram my nervous system and become the meta programmer to be able to ask these questions like, who is the master who makes the grass green? Some of these things aren't meant to be answered. So that must be first understood. That's going to go back to Plato's Republic. These things must be philosophized upon. I must become the philosopher. I must ask real questions and realize that every answer I have may just be another shadow on the wall. And so we're going to continue this discussion because we just must understand that the Epstein files have been released, but only half of them, and most of it is redacted. That there is a culture war going on between two sides who are fighting for something very contradictory, contrasting opinions that are leading to the same end. This corporate socialism that we're falling into, that we are already within, that the dystopian world of a Philip K. Dick's, of psychopaths, it is building up around us. It is built around us already. And I agree. May Odin watch over all of us. May the great eye see all things. And it's not the great eye of the dark sorcerers, but it's the great eye of God. The great eye of the soul that is connected to Logos and Nous, the great mind, the great intellect. And so all these black pillars and all these certain conspiratorial occult accounts out there, they're going to continue to try to make you believe that the Freemasons are in control, that the Illuminati is in control, that, the Golden Dawn, the AA, the Rosicrucians, the Invisible College, all these terms, which are real organizations and real magical societies and have done real things. But as Buckminster Fuller states, we are on spaceship Earth. And it seems right now nobody is at the helm. And I think that's really important because you must take the helm. You must be the hero on your journey. and that there are things that you can do to wake up and pull yourself out, kicking and screaming out of the cave. And when you go back in the cave to go about your everyday things, you got to eat, you got to be in relationship towards others, you got to work, you got to exercise, you got to go to your family, you got to talk nice. You got to realize that not everybody's going to believe the things that you believe in, and that's okay. And through the art of philosophy, through the love of wisdom, the love of understanding, the love of reason, we can come together in a way that is coordinated. And we can dissect the moment so we can understand what is true and really going on. And the only thing that truly needs to be burnt down is your own worldview, not the world. Because then you can reconstruct it in a way that matters. You must self-mythologize. You must find your own personal myth, and you must reconstruct your life in a way that matters to you and nobody else. But realize it's grounded in real things. That is why we do rooting practices. That is why we are material beings looking for our anagogic, our ascent into the stars. But in the same time, we're bringing down God into our being, because that is the gift that we have. Thank you, everyone, for this beautiful evening. We got a lot in store. Miguel Connor of Gnostic Bite, of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. The brilliant Miguel Connor, somebody I've been listening to for a very long time, and I think everyone else should listen to as well. He has amazing guests, and he's continuing to break down the matrix and to let us know that we are in the desert of the real. Did an interview with him that'll be coming out. Going to be interviewing Dr. Heather Lynn. She is brilliant. She's an alternative archaeologist, and everybody should look into her work. Go over to the Occult Rejects and watch all of their things. What they're doing over there is amazing. Everybody on that channel, everybody who's part of the Rejects, myself included, we're all just trying to do that. We're trying to figure out what is real. And so we're having that conversation. I'm having it over here. We're having it over there. And at the same time, we're going to be coming out with film, literature, anime, stories of all kinds, and we're going to be breaking them down. I appreciate everybody out there. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, and follow the channel. We're growing, we're getting bigger, and we're building this community more and more. I'm going to be having a lot of stuff coming out. We're breaking down music, and we're breaking down all the nonsense that certain people spew about the magical, the Western esoteric tradition. And it's time to set the record straight. And so, again, before I end it, I think you should definitely be interviewed, whoever you are. Go on, Miguel. Miguel's the man. We're going to have Miguel on. It's going to be great. We had him on. We're going to continue. He's writing another book, the David Bowie book. It's awesome. His work is all amazing. Dr. Heather Lynn, she's amazing. On the Occult Rejects, we're having Grimerica on. They are somebody I've listened to for a very long time as well. Within all the chaos, they're trying to find the truth. There are a lot of people out there that are trying to do that. So you can just hit on these streams of consciousness of people who've walked out of the cave, or at least still in the process of. So thank you all. Make sure, comment on things. Make sure to continue as we move through the desert of the real. Have a beautiful evening and have a good night.